Federal agents have raided a $14 million compound. What they found underground is staggering.
At approximately 03:47 this morning, a coordinated federal strike force intercepted and neutralized the largest cartel convoy operation ever documented on American soil. In 22 minutes, we dismantled what took them 18 months to build. That is not a movie trailer. That is not a video game cutscene. That is a direct quote from Deputy Director Marcus Holloway of the Department of Homeland Security, standing behind a podium with the flags of 6 federal agencies behind him. Here are the numbers they released. 147 cartel vehicles, 892 individuals detained, 47 tons of fentanyl, 1 million fentanyl pills, 2 tons of methamphetamine, 340 pounds of heroin, 47 million in cash, 23 confirmed cartel lieutenants, and one name that nobody saw coming, Governor Raymond Castellanos of the fictional state apparatus that had been quietly protecting this operation for over 3 years. If you think you understand how deep cartel infiltration goes in America, you are wrong. And by the time this story ends, you will understand why federal agents are calling this the most dangerous political cartel operation ever discovered on United States soil. Let me show you how it started. Let me show you what they found. And let me show you why every mile of Texas highway is now considered a war zone. 03:47 hours. Laredo, Texas. The fog rolled off the Rio Grande like smoke from a battlefield. The streets were dead. Not quiet. Dead. The kind of silence that happens when everyone who knows something has already gotten out of the way. On the roof of a warehouse on Santa Maria Avenue, an FBI tactical spotter adjusted his thermal scope. Below him, 18 black Suburbans sat in formation. No lights. No engines running. Just waiting. 3 blocks east. A DEA strike team crouched behind a row of shipping containers at the rail yard. They had been in position for 4 hours. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the occasional crackle of encrypted radio traffic. And then the voice came through. All units. Convoy is moving. I repeat, invasion convoy is in motion. Execute Operation Thunderhead. What happened next took exactly 22 minutes. And it changed everything. The first ICE tactical unit hit the lead vehicles on Interstate 35 just north of the checkpoint. They did not use spike strips. They did not use pit maneuvers. They used something new. Armored Humvees with reinforced bumpers slammed directly into the engine blocks of the convoy trucks at 45 miles per hour. It was not a car chase. It was a controlled demolition. The first 3 trucks crumpled like aluminum cans. The drivers never even touched the brakes. 1 second they were accelerating towards San Antonio. The next second they were spinning across 4 lanes of highway, with federal agents already rappelling from helicopters above. But this was not a simple traffic stop. This was a coordinated strike on 17 locations across 4 Texas counties happening simultaneously. In Zapata County, SWAT teams breached a fortified ranch house that had been operating as a cartel command center. They used flashbang grenades and battering ram. The front door came off its hinges in less than 2 seconds. Inside, they found something that made veteran agents stop in their tracks: a wall of monitors. 17 screens showing live feeds from cameras positioned along 340 miles of Texas border. The cartel had their own surveillance network. They were watching the watchers. But that was not the worst part. On the center screen, there was a digital map. And on that map, there were green dots representing every border patrol shift change, every checkpoint rotation, and every scheduled aerial patrol for the next 72 hours. Someone inside law enforcement had been feeding them everything. In Webb County, a second team hit an underground casino that had been operating beneath a tire shop for 6 years. When they breached the floor, they found stairs descending 3 stories into the earth. Down there, they found 12 million in cash. They found weapons. They found a sophisticated drug superlab capable of producing 500,000 fentanyl pills per day. And they found a steel door. When they cut through it, they discovered a tunnel. Not a crude hole scraped through dirt. A professionally constructed passage with reinforced concrete walls, electric lighting, ventilation system, and a rail system for moving cargo. The tunnel extended 1.2 miles. It crossed directly under the Rio Grande and emerged in a warehouse in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. This was not a smuggling route. This was infrastructure. This was a permanent installation designed to operate for decades. But the third raid was the one that changed the entire investigation. Zor 358 hours, a ranch property 40 miles north of Laredo. On paper, it belonged to an agricultural equipment company. In reality, it was a fortress. When the FBI tactical team approached, they expected resistance. They got something worse: silence. The property was empty. Whoever had been there had left in a hurry. Coffee cups still warm on the table. Computers still running. A half-eaten meal on the kitchen counter. But in the basement, they found what they came for: sealed steel boxes, 47 of them, each one weighing approximately 60 pounds. When the bomb disposal unit cleared them, and the evidence technicians cracked them open. They did not find drugs. They did not find money. They found hard drives, encrypted servers, and paper ledgers written in code that would take federal cryptographers 3 days to break. What was on those drives would eventually expose the largest political cartel operation in American history. 11:47 hours. FBI Cyber Forensics Division, Quantico, Virginia. The room was cold. The analysts liked it that way. Heat was the enemy of the servers that lined the walls, humming with the processing power of a small nation. Senior analyst Patricia Vance had been staring at her screen for 6 hours. Her coffee had gone cold twice. She had not noticed either time. The encryption on the seized drives had been military grade, not cartel grade, military, the kind of protection you find on classified government communications. But Patricia had cracked harder system, and when the final firewall fell, what she saw made her reach for her phone and call the director directly. On her screen was a network diagram, hundreds of nodes, thousands of connections, shell companies in Delaware, ghost corporations in Nevada, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Panama, and Cyprus. The money flows were staggering, the $340 million moving through the system every quarter, disguised as agricultural equipment purchases, hidden inside charitable donations to fake nonprofit organizations, laundered through a chain of Mexican restaurants that existed only on paper. But the network had a name, a code designation that appeared on every major transaction, Project Nightfall. And Project Nightfall had an architect. Patricia followed the digital signatures. She traced the authorization codes. She mapped the encrypted communications that coordinated drug shipments, border crossing, and law enforcement schedule. Every thread led to the same place. Governor Raymond Castellanos. Not his office, not his staff, him. His personal encrypted authorization key was embedded in the operational commands for cartel logistics across the entire Texas-Mexico corridor. This was not corruption. This was not negligence. This was not a politician who looked the other way in exchange for campaign donations. This was command-level collusion. A sitting governor personally directing the largest drug trafficking operation in the southwestern United States. And the scope was beyond anything the FBI had ever documented. Castellanos had turned Texas into a secure transit hub for the Sinaloa cartel. He had used his authority to relax border enforcement at strategic choke points. He had installed loyalists in key positions throughout state law enforcement, and he had created a shadow system that allowed the cartel to move drugs, money, and people with near total impunity. But Project Nightfall was not just about drugs. The files revealed something darker, something that made senior officials in Washington reach for secure phones and start making calls they had never expected to make. Human trafficking routes, migrant smuggling corridor, women and children being moved through Texas like cargo, delivered to destinations across the country for purposes that the files described in clinical, horrifying detail. The cartel was not just selling drugs, they were selling people, and a sitting American governor was helping them do it. When Patricia finished her preliminary analysis, she sent one message to the task force commander. This is not an investigation anymore. This is a national security emergency. Recommend immediate escalation to full operational status. The response came back in 4 minutes. Authorized. Operation Thunderhead Phase 2 commencing at 0400 tomorrow. God help us all. Or 3:47 hours. The next morning, Joint Operations Command Center, Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio. The room was built to coordinate military operations across entire continent. Tonight, it was focused on one state, one network, one mission. On the wall, a digital map of Texas glowed with red marker. 3 targets spread across 27 counties. Every safe house, every drug tunnel entrance, every cartel-controlled business, every compromised law enforcement facility. General Diana Prescott stood at the center console, her uniform crisp, her expression carved from granite. She had commanded operations in 3 foreign countries. She had never expected to command one in her own. Final count, she said. All units. The reports came in from across the state. FBI reporting 240 agents in position. DEA confirming 180 personnel ready. IC tactical team standing by. 340 officers across 12 strike zones. DHS border security confirming aerial assets. 6 Black Hawk helicopters. 4 surveillance drones. 2 fixed-wing aircraft. Texas National Guard reporting 400 troops on standby for perimeter security. General Prescott nodded. Total operational strength, 160 federal and state personnel. Full tactical authorization. She looked at the clock. 03:58. 2 minutes to dawn. All units confirm final ready status. The responses came back in sequence. 12 strike team, 60, 3 targets. 1 synchronized assault. At 0400 exactly, General Prescott spoke 2 words. Execute Thunderhead. The raids hit like a thunderstorm. In McAllen, SWAT teams breached a warehouse that had been disguised as a furniture distribution center. Inside, they found 300 pounds of cocaine packed into hollow bedroom sets. In Brownsville, DEA agents stormed a nightclub that had been operating as a cartel recruitment center. They arrested 47 individuals and seized communications equipment that linked the operation to cartel leadership in Culiacan. In El Paso, FBI tactical units hit a mansion in the hills that belonged to a man named only in the files as El Arquitecto. The house had reinforced walls, a panic room, and a private armory. It did not matter. The agents breached through the garage with an armored vehicle and were inside in less than 90 seconds. But the most significant raid happened in Laredo. The convoy that had been intercepted the previous night was just the beginning. Federal agents had tracked the route back to its origin, a compound on the outskirts of the city that appeared on no official maps. When the strike team arrived, they found something that rewrote their understanding of the operation. A tunnel complex, not one tunnel, a network of 7 interconnected passages spanning nearly 4 miles. Each tunnel was equipped with electric rail systems, ventilation, lighting, and communications infrastructure. The tunnels connected to safe houses, drug superlabs, and migrant processing centers across both sides of the border. They had been operating continuously for at least 4 years. The seizure numbers from the tunnel network alone were staggering: 3,1 tons of fentanyl, 90,000 fentanyl pills, 4 tons of methamphetamine, 220 pounds of heroin, and $23 million in cash packed into duffel bags and waiting for transport. But the tunnels contained something else, something that turned a drug investigation into a human rights catastrophe. Holding cells, 37 men, women, and children were found in underground chambers, waiting to be moved to destinations across the United States. Some of them had been there for weeks. Some of them did not know what country they were in. Federal agents called in medical teams, counselors, and translators. The processing took 14 hours. The stories they heard would haunt them for the rest of their lives. By noon, the operational statistics were compiled. 92 individuals detained, 147 vehicles seized, 7 tons of fentanyl recovered, 1 million fentanyl pills confiscated, 2 tons of methamphetamine seized, 340 pounds of heroin recovered, 47 million in cash seized, 23 confirmed cartel lieutenants arrested. And then came the part that nobody wanted to talk about. The inside job, 1430 hours, FBI field office, San Antonio. Senior Agent Michael Torres had been reviewing seized server logs for 8 hours. His eyes burned, his back ached, and his faith in his profession was dying one file at a time. The corruption was not subtle, it was not hidden, it was systematic. The file showed that 34 law enforcement officers across Texas had been receiving regular payments from cartel, connected accounts, deputies, sergeants, checkpoint supervisors, even 2 command-level officers in major departments. The payments were disguised as consulting fees, property rentals, and investment returns. But the timing was unmistakable. Every payment correlated with a specific operational advantage for the cartel. Border checkpoints that went unmanned during convoy movement, patrol schedules that created predictable gaps in coverage, raid warnings that gave cartel operations time to relocate. The cartel had not just infiltrated law enforcement, they had built a parallel system, a shadow force that wore the same uniforms, drove the same vehicles, and answered to a different chain of command. Agent Torres found communications between compromised officers that read like military operational planning, shift rotations designed to create corridors, falsified patrol reports that erased evidence of cartel movement, internal leaks that exposed undercover operations before they could produce results. And at the center of every communication chain was the same authorization, the same digital signature. Governor Raymond Castellanos. He had not just protected the cartel, he had commanded the corruption. He had personally approved the recruitment of compromised officers. He had reviewed the operational plans that allowed drugs and human beings to flow through Texas like water through a broken dam. When Agent Torres finished his analysis, he requested a meeting with the task force commander. How many total? The commander asked. 30. 4 confirmed. 17 more under investigation. And sir, at least 6 of them are still on active duty. Right now, as we speak. The commander's expression did not change. Arrest teams are already moving. By midnight, none of them will be wearing a badge. The arrests happened quietly. No siren, no media. Just federal agents appearing at homes and police stations with warrants and handcuffs. Deputy sheriffs, highway patrol sergeants, a checkpoint supervisor who had been with the department for 18 years. When they were brought in for processing, some of them cried. Some of them made excuses. Some of them stayed silent. But one of them, a deputy named Rodriguez, who had been on cartel payroll for 4 years, said something that stuck with the agents who interviewed him. You don't understand. There was no other choice. They had my family. They had everyone's family. Once you're in forever. Or you're dead. The cartel had not just corrupted these officers, they had trapped them. The same system that moved drugs and people had also moved threats, leverage, and fear. and the man who had designed that system was still sitting in the governor's mansion in Austin, waiting for the phone call he knew was coming. The connection between local corruption and continental-scale logistics became clear as federal analysts mapped the full extent of Project Nightfall. Texas was not the destination. Texas was the gateway. The operation files revealed drug distribution routes extending to 43 states, trucking companies with falsified manifests, shipping contractors who altered cargo documentation, agricultural transport networks that moved drugs alongside legitimate produce. The weekly throughput was calculated at 2 tons of fentanyl, 800 pounds of methamphetamine, and 400 pounds of heroin reaching American communities every 7 days through this single network. The human trafficking corridors extended even further. Migrant smuggling routes connected Texas border crossings to destinations in Georgia, North Carolina, California, and New York. The pricing structures in the files showed that the cartel charged between $8,000 and $15,000 per person for transport and placement. The victims were not just crossing the border. They were being delivered to employers, to traffickers, to situations that the files described with bureaucratic detachment that made the horror worse. And Governor Castellanos had approved every route, had signed off on every expansion, had personally authorized the operational security measures that kept the system hidden for 3 years. His office had created fake green energy grant program that funneled money to cartel-connected contractors. His administration had approved construction permits for buildings that existed only to house tunnel entrances. His appointments to state regulatory boards had installed loyalists who looked the other way when inspection requests came across their desks. He had not just failed to stop the cartel, he had redesigned state government to serve their interest. The final document in the seized files was labeled Phase 3 Authorization. It outlined a plan to expand the tunnel network into New Mexico and Arizona, to install additional compromised officers in federal positions, to create permanent, undetectable corridors for drug and human trafficking that would operate indefinitely regardless of which party controlled the White House or Congress. Governor Castellanos had not been building a smuggling operation. He had been building a parallel state, a shadow government designed to serve cartel interests for decades, and he had almost succeeded. The arrest of Governor Raymond Castellanos happened at 2300 hours on a Thursday evening. Federal marshals entered the governor's mansion through the service entrance. There were no cameras, no reporters, no dramatic confrontation. He was sitting in his office, reading a briefing document about agricultural policy. He looked up when the door opened. He saw the badges, he saw the handcuffs, and according to the marshals present, he said one sentence: "I wondered when you would figure it out." He did not resist. He did not ask for a lawyer. He walked out of the mansion in handcuffs and was transported to a federal detention facility where he remains pending trial on 47 counts including racketeering, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and conspiracy against the United States. The investigation is ongoing. Additional arrests are expected. The full scope of compromised officials and cartel-connected operations may take years to fully document, but the 22 minutes on that Texas highway changed everything. The coordinated strike that began at 3:47 hours dismantled an operation that had taken 18 months to build and 3 years to protect. The message from federal authorities was clear. There is no sanctuary for this kind of corruption. There is no position high enough to provide immunity. There is no system sophisticated enough to hide from coordinated federal investigation. So what does this mean for you? What does this mean for the communities that were being used as transit corridors for poison and human misery? The 7 tons of fentanyl seized in Operation Thunderhead represents approximately 1 billion lethal doses. That is enough to kill every person in the United States 6 times over. And it was moving through Texas every quarter, protected by a system designed by a man who swore an oath to serve the people of his state. The 1 million fentanyl pills recovered from cartel warehouses and tunnel complexes were destined for high schools and college campuses and suburban neighborhoods where parents had no idea their children were one bad decision away from death. The migrant smuggling networks that were dismantled had been charging desperate families their life savings for the privilege of being stuffed into truck trailers and underground holding cells, moved across the country like cargo, and delivered to situations that no human being should ever experience. This is what political corruption looks like when it operates at scale. It does not just steal money. It does not just compromise institutions. It kills people. It destroys families. It turns highways into war zones and tunnels into tombs. And it only survives when good people stay silent. The officers who first noticed discrepancies in patrol schedule. The analysts who flagged suspicious financial transactions. The agents who spent months building cases against targets who seemed untouchable. They did not stay silent. They did not accept that this was just how things were. They pushed until the system broke open and the corruption was exposed. That is the only way this ends. Not with speeches or policies or political promises, with people who refuse to look away, with investigators who follow the evidence wherever it leads, with a justice system that holds the powerful accountable to the same standards as everyone else. Governor Castellanos thought he had built something permanent. He thought the money and the protection and the power would last forever. He was wrong. 22 minutes. That is how long it took to begin dismantling what he spent 3 years building. 22 minutes of coordinated action by people who believe that the law applies to everyone. If you made it this far, if you understand what this story means, then you understand something important about how power works in this country. It does not always need violence. Sometimes it only needs silence. Sometimes it only needs good people to decide that the problem is too big, too complicated, too dangerous to confront. The cartels count on that silence. The corrupt officials count on that silence. The entire system that moves drugs and people and death through American communities counts on ordinary citizens deciding that someone else will handle it. Operation Thunderhead proved that the silence can be broken, that the system can be exposed, that even a sitting governor is not above the law when federal agencies coordinate and commit. But this story is not over. The networks that Governor Castellanos built extended beyond Texas. The corruption he cultivated has roots in other states, other institutions, other positions of power. The investigation continues. The arrests continue. The reconstruction of law enforcement agencies that were compromised continues. And the question facing every American community is simple. Will you stay silent, or will you demand accountability? The families who lost children to fentanyl deserve answers. The migrants who were trafficked through these corridors deserve justice. The honest officers who watched their colleagues take cartel money deserve to know that their service meant something. This is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is not about border politics or immigration policy. This is about organized crime infiltrating American government at the highest levels and the federal response that finally brought it down. If you believe this story matters, share it. If you believe accountability matters, demand it. If you believe that no one should be above the law, then remember what happened on that Texas highway at 03:47 hours. 22 minutes changed everything. What happens next depends on whether we remember why it mattered.